Okay, a quick confirmation that now you online can see the Microsoft Teams thing, because then I'm gonna switch to the tab. Yes, okay, cool. So now you can all see this. Hi everyone, good day. Welcome to the Ecosystems Birds of a Feather. We have 30 minutes of time for discussion at the end, so running a bit over for technical issues is not an issue. Please, if you want, you can access this QR code or that tiny URL, and it'll get you access to the Google Drive. Inside the Google Drive is a Google document that has the agenda. I'm getting lots of pings. Okay, good. So I'm moving on. Have you all got access? Well, it's CHPC. Let me just post the tiny URL in here, tinyurl.com, CHPC Ecos BoF 2024. All right, so you online can access that. Okay. So first and foremost, I'd like to introduce two people to the project that you might not know. One of them is sitting in the room, Funeka. Do you want to say hello? So those online, if you can't see, Funeka was waving her hands. So she has now taken on a new role at the HPC, and one of her roles is HPC Ecosystems Project Coordinator. She will be a primary contact for ecosystem sites. She will hassle you for our regular meetings that we're all supposed to have, and contact you for the quarterly reports for the SKA, and general feedback for the community when we need it. She's also involved with project admin and operations and shipping of hardware and all of that sort of stuff. And then we also have Inga Meyer. I don't think she's permanent, but she is filling the role of Leslie at the moment. So she is an assistant for the Ecosystems project with administration, primarily around the meetings and the minutes and that sort of stuff, but you will also get comms from her from time to time. So the first thing I'm going to share on today is a bit of feedback about our Cloudless Cluster Virtual Lab, which I spoke a bit about yesterday in the Education BoF. So all of you by now know about this. I'm also going to talk about the Ecosystems project summary of the last year in review, and then also give some time for our WITS kids to give some feedback about how they've used the Ecosystems hardware to enable their special interest group in high-performance computing. What I'd like to ask is for us to get more traction and attention out there, to actually have more impact. A lot of people already have seen what we've done. That poster on the WITS SIG has already secured us a potential pipeline of new hardware from University of Illinois at Chicago. But we need citations. If you're publishing papers or doing any research or posters, it'd be really great to at least cite the project, because that gives us more attention, more impact, and then more people know about it. In fact, I've just helped with a 260-page physics paper thing, and they didn't even know about ecosystems. And a lot of the stuff they were talking about was about how Africa needs something to help deliver hardware and build training workforce and all of that. And I was like, guys, we actually have been doing something like this for 10 years, and they didn't even know about it. So that's why we need to get the citations out there. So if I can give one quick summary about how we're doing in the last year. For those that are asking about new hardware, Stampede 2 hardware pipeline is ready. There's actually hardware sitting on a pallet in the TAC data center ready to ship. TAC, Brian's asking when it'll be shipped out. So right now, we don't have enough money to pay for the shipping. And the problem is the base cost, the non-variable cost, is more than the budget that's allocated this financial year. So we're in a meeting every month, typically, to discuss these sort of things. Edward has told me that when the next financial year rolls out, we should have enough funding to allocate for it. I've done some performance evaluations of Stampede 2 with some of you. The Knights Landing Xeon Phi's are actually more performant than the Lingao equivalent nodes for much lower power consumption. So they're very useful for particular use cases. The TAC operations director is grumpy that we're using up their floor space, but then the TAC logistics manager is defending us and saying, no, this is really important to get to South Africa to distribute. So right now we're not under any specific time pressure because I've got a good relationship with everyone. I'm talking to them quite candidly about the situation. We have discussed the potential, if someone else is really interested in getting hardware urgently and has some funding to bring that money together to fund the gap, and then get a portion of that hardware, earmarked for you. We have quite a lot of hardware sitting on those pallets. I think it's probably 6 full racks equivalent of Stampede 2. And because Stampede 2 is Knights Landing, you're talking at roughly with hyperthreading, 270 cores per node. And that's with high bandwidth memory as well. I think 32 gigs or 64 gigs of high bandwidth memory included. So it's a really beefy system for particular use cases. In addition, I mentioned this, the University of Illinois at Chicago has offered us hardware. By the way, I don't have a timekeeper because unfortunately my timekeeper is unwell. Can someone give me a heads up in 5 minutes, please? Brian, thank you. University of Illinois at Chicago is offering hardware as well. That was prompted from the VIT student poster that we presented at PERC. Shout out to John Poole and Matthew Kaywood, who spent money and time to get that poster printed in the US and host that poster on our behalf because we weren't able to be there. And it's through their efforts that we now have University of Illinois at Chicago offering us 2 systems. It's the Sabre system, and I think the other one is the Excalibur, but I can't remember. That's a discussion that we started at SC, and I'm going to follow that up later. We also have network switches that have been offered to us. Celestica is a company that does network switches. They've offered us massive amounts of their network switches. We tried for almost a year to get them imported through the CSR. For whatever reason, beyond many of our understanding, they are grading this network switch as military hardware. So one of my colleagues, and I'm not mentioning David, he said the only way they're military is if we throw them at you. But that still didn't convince CSR that we could import it. So we were blocked. It's like a literal military hardware for a network switch. So now Wits has taken on that banner. Senzo might report about it during his session here. But right now, that's where we're at. We've got an entire vendor that's willing to donate. And they're one of the biggest vendors in the world. If you actually look, they've done a massive multi-billion-dollar acquisition now. And they're sitting there frustrated that we can't just take their switches. In terms of new sites, Sefako Makato has joined. Shout out to Tarai. RSTP, Eswatini, Mtunzi. They've also now had their system deployed. And University of Mpumalanga is next in the pipeline. The hardware is sitting in the data center, well, in the projects room at the CHPC. I just need to finish that off when I'm back from leave. In terms of challenges, Lesotho, Dear Kitseng, I don't know if you're here. Okay, so Dear Kitseng is hopefully coming a bit later. Their contract for HPC staff ended. All the people that we trained have left because they don't have jobs. A similar challenge happened in Mozambique with the staff contracts, but we were able to resolve that, so they're currently back on employment. And then unfortunately, one of the members of our community was blacklisted by our US funders because they really messed up with the ART at SC24. They gave wrong information and we forfeited one of the $4,000 sponsorships. So they've been like blacklisted. In terms of the community, we're sitting at some pretty nice numbers, but whether that reflects activity is a different story. But we've got 336 of us on the ecosystem Slack and constantly trying to build that and recruit people. I'm going to talk a bit later and get your feedback about what ideas we can do for next year. We've got a few things in the pipeline based on your feedback. Project deployment, 34 sites across Africa right now. We know about these. I won't go into too much detail. Ignore that. That's, for a different topic. But that's just my travel map. And, those are all the sites. These 2 are planned, Angola and DRC, but we've had to stop them for costs and for war. So those 2 are still part of the SADC group, but they're just being paused. In terms of the virtual lab, we've run this new version for 12 months. A lot of you know about it. I spoke about it yesterday. We've hit over 1,000 users online using this lab. Most countries in the world seem to be interested in it. And actually 20% of the users that have used this training are from the US. And the concept normally is that people in the US know more than us. But the fact is, the feedback I've got from the guys in the US is that they really like our lab, and they're actually helping to develop. They're doing more of the work right now than any of us are on OpenHPC version 3. And we tried to time our release with the launch of a new version at SC, but we couldn't get that working, unfortunately, because there was a bug with the way that Docker works. Anyway, so there we go. Virtual lab's looking pretty solid. And that's the last training. I don't need to go into that, but the last training we did was 80 people. Some of the fun facts about that is we've developed that self-certification tool. So you can develop a cipher when you complete the training, and then you decrypt that cipher with our decryptor tool, and it gives you a certificate. You only get a working cipher if you actually complete the course properly. And Benjamin and a few others have implemented the downloadable cluster. So it's a full downloadable cluster. So if you need to train your workforce outside of developing the actual cluster, but maybe developing code or compiling code, testing MPI, stuff like that, you can just download a fully designed cluster. You just download a file, import it with Vagrant, and you've got the cluster. Yeah, I mentioned the collaborative effort. And a nice feature was that a lot of feedback I've got, which I didn't expect, a lot of the students actually know who I am because they used the virtual lab during that pre-SSC training that I gave. So that's also encouraging. So, a lot of you have used it as well. Yeah, I won't go into if anyone wants to help contribute, the boring part is that we can't get Werewolf 4 to work properly on the model that we're trying to do. In terms of ART SC24, we had people come. There were 6 from South Africa in the end. Mozambique had to pull out. It worked out to roughly $60,000 worth of funding. You all know Elizabeth Leake. If you don't, join our Slack workspace. She runs a nonprofit in the United States that supports us every year to go to TAC, to SC. Brian and I actually, and Peace, will be our 10-year anniversary next year of meeting each other at SC15 through this program. And I mean, that works out to roughly R1 million of funding that we get externally. And it's actually enabled some people from CHPC to even be able to go because of, budget limits. Yes, of course. You're going to have to meet the people. Time. Okay. So there's a lot more I need to say. So I'm just going to take up another 5 minutes. Thank you. That's the numbers that we've done. Numbers are good, but again, we need to actually get some results, and that's why Fineka is going to be harassing a lot of you for your reports. I was also invited to participate in an HPC discovery survey that was run across Africa, and that discovery was run by a group outside of our primary field of influence. So I was chomping at the bit to get involved because I thought they were asking the wrong sorts of questions, like how many nodes does your cluster have? And you'd rather know how many cores rather than how many nodes and stuff like that. So I did the best I could to help make it a more meaningful survey. It's the first of the surveys, but we hope to refine it. It was rushed out for someone else's publication. But for what it's worth, it's out there. It's a good first effort. I would like to look at refining it. There is a digital object link if you want to cite it or look at the content. I won't go into it here. But there was a survey conducted across most regions in Africa. So it was quite interesting to see the sort of responses that were out there and how many people actually don't know about their neighbors and what they have. For 24 and mostly 2025, we really want to roll out the Open On Demand officially. I've developed the Open On Demand lab. I need to just polish it off. The Cloudless Cluster expansion to Open HPC 3. The global seminar series that I spoke about yesterday. Really think there's a lot more that can be spoken about what we're doing, not just in ecosystems, but just more broadly. But that's a really good platform to showcase what you're doing. The CARC is another one, which I haven't mentioned, and that's through that CARC initiative that I have now got that partnership with NIH, and we're trying to raise $250,000. SE25, we don't know where it's going to be, but Elizabeth's really keen to do this again. You know, the co-funding, about R1 million. So please get on the Slack workspace or join the Google group for you to get the information. And then also, approval has been granted for us to run an internship for the Ecosystems project. So I'll share a bit more about that as well. So those are the future things, really. The Celestica Stampede 2, University of Illinois at Chicago, and University of Mpumalanga. In terms of the Stampede 2, we're running a separate grant application for that with the NIH and TAC, where we're applying for $250,000 NSF grant. It's been delayed constantly because the United States is pretty dysfunctional. Sorry, John. Not sorry. The federal government had delays, and then there was these uncertainties about who was going to be the president, and now there is certainty about the president, but there's uncertainty about what he's going to do with NSF grants. So we keep being told very favorably that we're being considered, but at the same time, you just have to wait. So we're now going in a separate, it's a very experimental advanced research grant called EAGER, and we're trying that angle. We think we've got a good chance there. But if we secure this grant, $250,000 will be split between the United States, South Carolina, and Africa. Then we will select partners from sites that are doing bioinformatics type workloads to come with us to TAC, get 10 days of training at TAC on Stampede 2 and Knight's Landing, and then go home with a full rack of Stampede 2. It's supposed to be more than I think it's supposed to be 5 petabytes of storage, but let's just call it a half a petabyte of storage. You will get 2 management servers and a full network as well, all built into that rack. So you'll get the full paid trip except for the flight. You need to have skin in the game. But once you're there, everything else will be covered by the grant, okay? And in terms of internships, this is going to be displayed on the Google Drive. But in a quick summary, there's lots of little projects that I'd like to see happen in ecosystems. I'm mostly one person with roughly 40% of my time allocated to this project. Lots of other people have got volunteer time, 10%, 15% or whatever. It's just really difficult to get anything done that we need, you know. So this has to be a community effort, but internships would be a good opportunity here. If you are a student primarily, you can get an opportunity to come work on one of these projects. They're short-lived projects primarily because then you can get the product out. In terms of feedback on the internships, we expect a poster. We'll support you in developing a poster, which we'll then submit to one of the HPC conferences. And if it's the right conference, like PERC, it actually counts as a publication equivalent, so then you'll develop an H-index and a research profile. So I'm going to stop here now. There's a QR code. This is to do with the community calls thing that I'll talk about once the others have finished their presentations. I would appreciate if you can give your feedback, if you haven't yet, about running community calls for the project next year. So I'll leave that up for a minute, but VITS is coming up, Brian, while that's up. And then I will be a little stricter with time, although we've got plenty of extra time. Cool? Thanks. I think sensor's on, yeah. So which one is it? Cool.
So I can sign one chair. As guys, my name is Brian. I'm from Wits University. It's good to see the guys from Wits University as well. It's nice to see Mervyn. It's nice to see Mervyn and the guys from the ecosystems here as well. Yeah, so we are from Wits. We have joined the BoF since 2015. And our first project was, well, okay, first of all, there are four of us in the mathematical sciences, and we run a pretty reasonable cluster. The management from CHPC was there as well to, is to verify it as well. So is there a thumbs up, Mervyn? Okay, yeah, so we have a thumbs up for that as well. So what we do, we have a team of about 4 people, and these are the responsibilities that we have, right? It's within the mathematical sciences. Let me just move on quickly. So the first piece of hardware we had in 2015, it was called Ranger. So a Ranger came with a few challenges as well. It was loaded with Xeon files, right? And at that moment, we had no user case for Xeon files at the university as well. But we did have a professor from advanced mathematics of finance, and he had a financial problem, right? But the only problem was that we had to format a portion of those nodes, okay, remove Linux from there, and we had to install Windows. So I phoned tech and I asked them, so how do you install, and they had no idea, right? So I had to try and figure it out, and we managed to install, I think it was Windows Server 2008 on there. Yeah, and we did get a few financial research papers out. We also had to upgrade their, so they had a small card. It was 8 gig. I think it was 8 gig, Brian, in terms of Ranger. Okay, what was the size of the cards? Yeah, I'm sorry, it was a CF basically, yes, yeah. So we had to do, yeah, so we had to change it as well to a much bigger size as well, yeah. So it was 8 gig as well, yeah. Let me move on to the next slide. So we did have the first workshop. I see a few guys from Botswana, okay, was there as well. Anyone from here who was there in 2015? So it was Brian. Who else? Okay, you as well, Fanika. Yes, yeah. So we do have some. I think it was. There was a few of us. I think we had a few. About 6 countries was there, right? Yes, yeah. So I think it was the biggest one so far, okay, which we had in terms of the training workshop as well. We have some pictures there, and we see a few guys from CHP, from CHPC looking very hungry. Yeah, And there's also Xiaomu as well. Is there as well, yeah. So the next piece of hardware we had was Stampede. So, and it came on a truck, right? And we had to move it from the ground floor onto the third floor. And I have the scars to prove how heavy it was, right? So the challenges we had on there, uh, it had no GPUs, right? So what we had to do was that we had to upgrade it. We put two GPUs per node, and I think each GPU has a core of 1,280 GPU cores, right? So if you like multiply by 80, guys, I think it is about like 84,000 okay, GPU cores, okay, at the moment. We also upgraded the RAM on there as well, and we're stuck in a second drive. Yeah, so and it cost us in the region of like 100, around like 105,000, which we paid okay, for as well. It's being used at the moment by these following guys. It's for data science, okay, RL, also for research as well. And the fourth year, we do teach a course as well, right? So they make use of it as well. So now for the man of the moment, we have Senzo. Senzo, let me see if your picture is here. Yes, yeah. So we do have a new project coming up, and I suppose like Senzo will speak a bit more about that as well. Senzo, is over to you.
Hi everyone. I haven't prepared anything, but yeah, on the new project. So we're creating a new data center, and one of the goals of the data center is not one of the goals. The main goal is to run the data center strictly on open on demand, and one of our visions is uh, besides training, besides student access and research access, one of the things we've noticed on the HPC ecosystems communities is sometimes a person in a different country has an issue, and their issue might take 2 or 3 days to solve. So during that 2 or 3 days, if your system is down for two to three days, how do you handle keeping your researchers or keeping your researchers happy during that time? Or how do you make sure that their work continues during that 2 to 3 days? And one of our visions was perhaps it might be time to have a smaller system where for those people that don't necessarily need to go directly to CHPC, because if they did need to go directly to CHPC, they'd already be there. So you might have local users that just need limited resources for that small period of time, and you want to make sure that those researchers continue while you troubleshoot and get your system back up. So one of our visions was to provide such a facility and provide such a resource free of charge to partners in the HPC ecosystems community. So our goal basically is to make sure that people like you, who we consider partners, who we have a deep relationship with, because we are all working hand in hand to grow Africa, is to make sure that you don't face unnecessary scrutiny and unnecessary stress at work because your system is down and there's people breathing down your neck to say, get this up because my work has been delayed by a day or 2 days. So if you need that emergency 2 to 3 days to get everything back up and move your research back and move the research or resources back to your system, we provide you with that small break, basically. So that is our vision for the data center. It's due to come online around March to April next year. So we've done the fiber connection already. We're waiting for the trays for the electrical and networking, and hardware should be coming in the next few weeks. We haven't decided necessarily on all the hardware. We've just started on basically deciding on the GPUs that we might be using and see what type of hardware we might be using. Obviously, it's not going to be an overly complex system because, again, our department works on a shoestring budget. Our goal is always to make sure that research continues. It doesn't matter if we're spending 100,000 wherein someone else spends 2 million on one node. So we try and make sure that the research continues. And when we say research continues, we don't necessarily just mean academic researchers. Some like professional academic researchers, there are people who are masters or PhD students who have tight deadlines, who also need these resources. And our goal in Africa should be that we want to grow even at PhD level, even at master's level. We want to increase our output at those levels as well. So if you say, I have a PhD student, their research is due in 3 days, my system is down, we won't turn you back because it's a PhD student. If we have the capacity available, then we'll provide it. Again, we haven't figured out necessarily how we'll handle the allocation. It might be first come, first served basis, but it will mostly be based on resource availability. I think that's all from me. Thanks.
Thanks, Enzo. Thanks, Enzo. So finally, if we have a look, if we have a look at this, at the machine on the left, right? So we had it from 2015, and so you wonder, okay, so what happens to those machines in the next like 10 years, right? So I'll tell you. And okay, this is my pet project, right? So they all go to a place called a museum, which we are building at WITS, right? So I've done some some research, and it seems to be the first computer museum in South Africa, if like not in the continent, right? So it is up and running, and here's a glimpse of what it looks like, right? So if you have a look on the middle there, you can see a sun. The sun is and there's a sun monitor here as well. It's in the way of the sun, you know, because we had no curtains and all of that as well. Yeah. So the sun was on the sun, which was on the sun, right? So here, and we do have a smaller collection of gaming. So these are the old with. Yeah, so sorry. So if you can guess what the size of this drive here, I'll give you Brian's phone. Okay, what's the size of this drive? Now, Lily, okay, everyone excluding Lily, right? Okay, so okay, this is like 300 megs, okay? And if we have a look at the size of this here, this USB is like 2 gigs. Yeah, and we do have some, okay, who knows what this here is? Now, it says it says 300 on the writing, on the, okay, it says 10 megs, okay. Yeah, okay, who knows what this here is? Okay, besides this, are the people who has been to the museum, right? Okay, this is a mechanical calculator. So it's called a Curta. I'm not sure if you guys know this. And if you have a look at the slide rule, okay, it was used to put human beings in space, right? So it was all these things. And we do have some other cool. Okay, this is a laptop, and these are the yeah, and this is the first Mac down here as well. And these are all the gaming stuff. So if you are into games, it's like Atari, Brian. Yeah. So okay, guys. Okay, that's the end of my talk. Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Brian and Senzo. So I was supposed to talk for 20 minutes. I didn't. So we're actually only a few minutes later than scheduled. Sean, I don't know if you're presenting remotely or if I'm opening your slides and you're just going to tell me when to switch slides.
Yeah, I think I'll prefer if I can upload them. I'm doing that right now and then can navigate myself. So
okay.
we can try
I've got,
that.
have they been updated? Because I downloaded them.
Yeah, they were updated in the last 20 minutes or so, I think.
Okay, cool. Let me know when to download it. Another cool thing
Sure,
while
thanks.
that's happening is in the museum they got a boxed ZX Spectrum, ZX81. Oh, very cool. Well,
Okay.
while that's uploading.
Something's happening. I wonder if you can stop sharing from your side,
Okay.
because
Is it this one that I see
something's
here,
flickering
proposed
at the
monitoring
moment.
stack?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, on my side, it looks like it's flickering between monitors. Okay, it's coming, but
How's that?
it's unstable. I don't know what the others online can see, but I'm seeing flickering as well.
What's flickering?
I could stop sharing the actual presentation.
But okay. Do you want to just share it on your side? I don't know. I think. Well, maybe.
Okay, have you got that?
Everyone, we can see it fine here. Okay.
Okay,
John
so it
says
looks
it's
like
good.
you sharing it then, Brian? I'm not
Yeah,
sharing
I
it
think
at the moment.
let's just, you just tell me when to switch slides.
Okay. Sure, no problem. Okay, then we can start. So, hi everyone, I'm Sean February. I work in the same office as Brian at CHPC. And one of the things I've been working on recently is developing a monitoring stack. And I'll, give you guys an overview of what it's all about. Okay, next slide. So it's just a bit of a sales pitch to this. Next slide, or next sequence. Yeah. In a nutshell, the why is about sorry, just got this, about enabling, among other things, a sort of uniform way to monitor the HPC ecosystem sites. And what are we using? Well, our choice is currently a trio of Grafana, Prometheus, and Node Exporter. And how does it work? As it stands, somewhat of a work in progress, but we hope to have everything done using Docker and with a little bit more effort. Okay, next slide. So just to unpack the stack a bit more, we try to adopt a philosophy of using open source tools and technologies, employ automation and reproducibility wherever possible, and encourage portability. Just the next slide. Just to give you an overview of the architecture summary. It was originally, again, born from some internal monitoring need, and it currently looks as follows. We have Ansible as our starting point, in which we manage and describe all the configuration needed to deploy this monitoring stack. And of course, portability comes in the form of Docker through containerization. And then finally, our three components, which first is Node Exporter, and that's the service that exposes metrics such as the CPU, RAM, disk, networking, utilization, among other things of each host. And that feeds everything into Prometheus, which is actually a scraper to store in its time series database. And then ultimately Grafana, which provides us with a platform for visualizing such data sources. So yeah, on the right there, you'll see a typical cluster, how we would set it up, where all three of those services would be set up on, let's say, a management or admin server. And then Prometheus will then scrape those node exporters from all the other targets that's involved in the cluster. Okay, then next slide. So currently we have the setup for following versions of CentOS and Rocky Linux. But of course, with a little bit of effort, we can expand that to other platforms. And just a little bit for those interested in the configuration itself, I've just shown the Docker Compose file that's used, let's say, on the monitoring server that deploys all 3 services and manages them. You can see how they are defined. Each one has a different port, and they're all connected over a single network so that they can see each other on the same host. Okay, next slide. Right, in terms of Ansible, just a taste of it. It's pretty straightforward. We have some key variables defined in the defaults. And as you can see, it's a number of the packages that are required for Docker to install that. And then as well as the files and templates needed by the tasks that the Ansible role defines. It's quite a long file, so I won't show it, but basically it involves installing the required packages for running Docker on each host, starting the Docker services, and then copying the relevant files and templates across. And then starting each of the containers, setting up the credentials of Grafana, and then finally importing the node exporter dashboard. And just as an example, sort of fictitious inventory file at the playbook level, when you call the role, that's what a typical inventory file looks like. You just list and define all your hosts that you want to deploy this stack on. All right, next slide. So in an ideal world, it's simple as that. Let's see, next slide. We can end up with the next slide, please. So we just point our browser to, in order to access it, our browser to the monitoring server's IP address at port 3000. Next slide. And we'll hopefully be presented with this web page for Grafana. And in the stack, we do define a set of credentials, and that can be manually configured as needed. And next slide. And this is just a taste of what the node exporter dashboard looks like. What you're seeing there is just a summary of a particular node, showing all the utilizations across various metrics, CPU, memory, network, and etc. Next slide will show the sort of drop down that you have as well when you set this all up, where you can choose different nodes and explore the individual activities. So that's basically next slide. Basically all the visualizations done. So that will be working like that in an ideal world. Next slide. It's not quite that simple in real life. Next slide. So in the not too distant future, we'd like to deal with the special case of that's needed on the open HPC compute nodes. They require a bit of intervention to our current stack because they are diskless and they don't have access to the internet. So we have to just make a few modifications first. And then we'd like to pilot this to 2 sites within the next few months. That's the goal. And then lastly, set up a centralized dashboard in an attempt to, view all sites in sort of one centralized place, where we can set up our own, custom views as needed. Next slide. And on that, we hopefully get a bit closer to taking over the world. Hey, Brian. That's it. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, Sean. Just to add a little context to this. So we've been running this project for like 10 years. And it's actually ridiculous, if we're honest, that we can't get a snapshot, even as the project lead entity, of what's going on at all the sites. We shouldn't have to have someone like Funeka asking you every 3 months for feedback. We should be able to just get that feedback. And as a community, it makes a lot more sense if it's dynamic, so you don't have to worry about it. It's just done for you. And we have that visibility. So when Mervyn or Vanna or Happy needs to do a report for whoever is higher up, or if a US donor or funder wants to know what's actually happening, they can go and look and get an instant snapshot. There is a little, and I mean very little, resistance from sites to do this. And those are the ones I'm a bit reluctant to want to help, because you shouldn't be reluctant to give visibility. If we're honest about what we're trying to do, which is build a community and use resources that have been given to us for free, we shouldn't be withholding information. So Sean is helping because he's the monitoring and reporting guru in what was the ACE lab right now. And we need to roll this out. So all future deployments have a terms and conditions contract, and that's going to include allowing us to get reports. If you don't want to give us reports, for example, VITS might be running your own monitoring and reporting, that's fine, as long as we get the data in a format that works for our dashboard. So if you come into what was the ACE lab, one of our legacy projects that Laura and I did probably 2 years ago was we started getting a kit set up. So we've got a nice big TV mounted on the wall. What we'd like to do is have a rolling dashboard that just rotates through different snapshots of different sites. And we can see the red. And I won't mention UKZN as the red, but you'll see the red, and then you'll see the greens, and then it'll be really cool, because then as a community, we can help each other. You see someone's down, you go, hey, you're down, you've been down for 6 months, can we help, right? There's a minor naming and shaming, that's not the goal. The goal is to actually just work together and actually make sure that all the lights are green. So there you go. So Sean is working on that. We have targeted 2 sites, Eswatini and Sefako Makato, because they signed the most recent terms and conditions contract for their hardware. So they don't have an option, and they are the pilot sites. But we're also very happy to have other people jump on and work with us, even develop your own. It's one of the internship projects was a separate monitoring thing where I want to run a user level login that does it all with a reverse tunnel using nothing else except the command line. And it can work, it's really simple. I just need, it's a good internship project. With that being said, thank you, Sean. We might have discussions about that later. Would the VITS kids like to come up? I think you're next up. You've been allocated 10 minutes. I'm flexible a little because we have so much extra time. So if it's interesting, you can talk for 12. Extra time. So where are your slides? Is it this one? Oh. Do you want to give it a shot, or do you want to? Okay. Over to you.
My main complaint was no one could see me last time. Am I allowed to take this off, please? Oh, there we go. We are ready. Okay.
All right. Okay. Just get this ready. Okay, so this is just going to be an overview of how the VITS HPC SIG uses HPC ecosystems. First, an introduction to who we are. My name's Renan. I'm studying in, I studied 3rd year biomedical engineering this year, going into information electrical engineering next year. I'm currently one of the organizers of the VITS HPC SIG, together with Lily and a few other members. We organize the SIG, help teams with the SIG, and we'll get into a little bit of what we do in the next slide. Let Lily introduce herself.
Hello, everyone. I'm Lily DeMello. I'm in my 2nd year of computer science. I'm studying at the University of the Witwatersrand, and I'm a copy-paste of Renaud, SCC, ISC, mentoring in the VITS SIG. And we're going to talk about what the SIG is and what we do. Before we jump into the exciting stuff of how we use the HPC Ecosystems hardware. So this may be a repeat for anyone who came yesterday, but we don't want to leave others out of the loop. So the group was founded in 2010, and then the student cluster competition started in 2012, which is when we became a little more formal, and we aimed to train teams for that cluster competition. And around the same time, the HPC Ecosystems was also started up, and we were allocated hardware from that pool as Wits University. Just to give a little context as to what the SCC is, they have 2 rounds. They have a selection round in July that chooses the 10 teams that compete in the competition here in December. And we at Wits were responsible for picking those teams. We send them to the selection round. They come back home. We train them for the national round. So that's what we were pre-2021. We've tried to expand our mandate to now provide a general undergraduate education to the undergraduate community. So not just people who are going to this competition. And we do this through weekly talks and practical sessions on things like compiling programs from source, Linux, Bash, shell scripting, all of that jazz. Yeah, so that's our mandate. We train teams for the SCC and we provide education to the undergraduate community. So moving back to the SCC training, when the teams come back from the selection round, this is where we make use of the HPC Ecosystems hardware given to us. And I'm going to let Reynard talk about that.
So this part will be an overview of how we use the HPC Ecosystems hardware to facilitate the informal education that we do. An overview, let's just do an overview of our resources. We currently have 15 working nodes from the HPC Ecosystems project, which is maintained with the help of the Wits Mathematical Sciences support team. The nodes are equipped, most of them, with 8-core Intel Xeon E5s, which are Sandy Bridge CPUs launched in about 2012. And we have legacy hardware going as far back as 2005 that are in operation. We do practical maintenance and repairs. Students are large contributors to the maintenance and, well, more maintenance, less repairs of the systems that is currently in use. Through this, students gain hands-on experience, replacing components, troubleshooting, hardware maintenance that are critical for HPC. The educational value beyond computation, outdated hardware that becomes non-functional after years of use, is used and showcased during open days at Wits, as well as our hardware lectures, where students go through the architectures, the historical uses, and the evolution of this hardware throughout time. We focus a lot on, not necessarily in the depth of design and how CPUs are designed and etc., but we focus on showing them what HPC what it was and what it is now, and of how far it's come and what they could do with the hardware at Wits currently. This year, we focused on expanding student involvement. We had a group of dedicated students that weren't part of the SEC team actually come and help set up nodes, and because we have a bunch of nodes that are currently not in use, we have a small production cluster which is currently needs a system administrator, and then we have 2 teams, Wits A, Wits 1, that have set up their own nodes that are working, that they're using for the competition here as training. So having extra students help with that setup is great, because 3 organizers, 4 organizers, it's difficult to manage that many systems. And it's not only getting systems up and working that you know work, it's testing every single component and making sure that everything works. CPUs, systems that you think have 2 CPUs only has 1, RAM that is not functional, things that don't boot, etc. All this, and in the span of our little, what we know of, most of these systems have been in use at Wits for the SIG for 5 years and have trained over hundreds of students directly. So I'll hand over to Lily to talk about the benefits of this.
Yeah, so we've learned all about what we're doing with it, but I think the really important part of it is the effects of what we're doing. And there's 2 things I want to highlight. The first thing is I think it does give us an edge at the student cluster competition. So from 2014 to 2023, Wits has won the local competition 7 times in 10 years, and the non-winning teams have secured 5 silvers and 4 bronze medals. And we just think that this physical hardware gives them expertise that not many other students would be privy to. We also want to note that more than 50% of the teams that the CHPC has sent to ISC was composed of VIT students. So we dominate that aspect as well. Yeah, so that's the first thing. We think it really assists us in the student cluster competitions. The second thing is this year, as we said, general undergraduate community education. We brought a bunch of select students from our general talks, and we asked them to help us troubleshoot some nodes. And we think this hands-on experience really benefited them. While we don't have the fanciest and newest systems, these decommissioned, lower specs, they are cost-effective and they are useful tools. Me personally, I don't think I would be where I am today without having the opportunity to open one of those, to play with the RAM, to play with the hard drive. It was a great opportunity for me. Yeah, and we think that all of this accumulates into helping develop a pipeline of HPC practitioners. We do think there is a gap in South Africa for developing young people to come into the HPC workforce, and we think our SIG tries to help fill in that gap. So speaking about the future, let's talk about our future plans.
All right. A big part of what we do is usually teams setting up their own clusters, so directly working with the hardware. Scaling that becomes difficult when you have, that's impossible. So what we're trying to do is make a dedicated cluster, the cluster you showed in that other image there. Hopefully through, instead of using those nodes that we want to train the other teams with, we're actually working with the HPC ecosystems to hopefully get some Dell M1000E nodes next year, which would be the SIG's first InfiniBand capable cluster, which we could use to not only, as Lily will show you, automate some stuff, but also train a broader audience of students that are not only involved in this SEC, but more for their personal research, etc. I'll let Lily go into the automation.
So those who attended the Education BoF yesterday, we mentioned that this year, instead of a quiz, we tried out a selection project where students had to deploy a 3-node virtual cluster using Vagrant and VirtualBox. It followed Brian's lab to help set it up, and then they had to run a little parallel program on it, and they had to submit build, run scripts, and the output file. Well, this is intensive for them. For us, it's also intensive. You have to go through all of that. You have to run them to see that they do work, to mark them. You have to check the output files. It just took a lot of time. So what we want to do is we want to use this cluster to automate it. So we use the Moodle learning management system, and it has an API to download the submissions from the site. Then that will take all the scripts and will load it up onto an open HPC node where it will be run multiple times and then standardized, and then those results will be sent back to the Moodle LMS, and that will make our jobs easier, and it will make the students' life easier because they can get some real-time feedback. Yeah, and that's all our plans currently. We're thankful that you guys took time out of your day to listen to this. We have our GitHub here on the last page if you want to see what our material is, and our email if you would like to contact us. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, just to make a quick few comments on that. So what they didn't really mention, which I have touched on, is that their little group has published a poster at PERC. And they've also just recently become published researchers as well. They've got a paper. It's going to be published in the JOCSE Journal of Computational Science Education roughly March. And I mean, these are undergraduate students, first and second year students that got peer reviewed at the ACM SC conference and got a paper published. And that's not to say they're anything special. They are great, but we're happy to work with anyone at any of the partner institutes to work on these sort of things. But they came with the workforce and the energy. Don't come and say, we want to collaborate with you and then leave it up to us to do the paper. That's the only thing we don't want. And in terms of the SEC benefits, there are some people here that are involved at other universities for SEC. You can also benefit like they have if you have hardware, and you will get hardware if you ask for it. You might be wondering, why are we giving M1000E Dells to a team that is already dominating the competition? Well, that's multifaceted. It's because A, they have a workforce to work on that hardware. B, they came asking. And C, they had the resources to collect the hardware and ship it over to their site. It isn't a fait accompli that they'll get it, but we're working on it. But at the same time, we chose WIT because it's the lowest barrier to entry. It's going to be exploring this as an option for other universities to take more ownership of their own. But they have an established model, and we want to feed into an established model to make it more robust so that it can be replicable to others. And I know that the WIT-SIG themselves are quite interested in expanding what they've done and the lessons learned to help other groups to form their own. So they're not your enemy. They just take your visas, opportunities to go overseas most of the time, but they're there to really share their knowledge, okay? And this is open to anyone. So I just wanted to make that clear. So the next thing on the agenda is a lightning presentation from one of our newest members of the ecosystems community who are deploying their own cluster, and that's Team Malawi. I don't know, is Solomon in the room? Hey, are you ready to come up and do a talk? You're not? Okay, is Alexius going to do anything, or should I open to a general discussion? Okay, cool. So welcome Team Malawi. They were one of the recent recipients of hardware a year ago. And I'm going to now open up for just general discussion. So Wits has done theirs, Sean's done his, WIT-SIG, Malawi. So I want to give some acknowledgements. The Ecosystems Project team is a big team. It's a community of affiliates and associates. TAC, obviously, Cambridge, STEMTRIC with Elizabeth, EPCC and Prace, OpenHPC, and also more recently, George Tech. These are not being shared on the screen. Hang on. Hang on. Google's hijacked it. Okay, there we go. Okay, that's better. Catching up. Okay, so there are some links that are in this shared folder to join if you're not part of the Slack community. For those that aren't part of the Slack community, you don't get these opportunities. The invitations to travel overseas, invitations to workshops, invitations to actually talk to the real world, big people that can hear what you're doing. Like I say, because people knock on the door, they get the opportunities. We're not going to come hunting. The days are gone where Brian with a Y can phone you or email you back in 2016 when I was lonely and had no one to work with. Now there's 350 people in the community. I even forget Brian's name. And it's just crazy, right? So you need to keep harassing me. Even if I don't respond, it's not because I don't like you, unless you're English, or Australian. But it's just that I'm too busy. And Funeka has been included in the project now to help with some of that workload, but also just seriously nag and shame me publicly. Just go into the Slack and say, @Brian, you haven't responded. What's up? And then I will go, oh, shucks, I'm so sorry. Give another lame excuse, but someone will hold me accountable. It's not because I don't care. Probably the most important link there is this ecosystems website. It's not in a great shape at the moment because, again, Brian mostly on his own trying to manage so many different things. But it's a functional website. On that link is a getting started page that'll give you the link to the workspace. Interestingly, there is someone who's a CIO of a software company of about 90 people in Durban who has now volunteered to become the webmaster of this. So it's nice and encouraging to see that people are taking a notice in this. This guy's doing his own pro bono time to manage the website. So hopefully it'll get better. Yeah, just paying the bills with the sponsors. Those are not our sponsors, that's the conference sponsors. I'll let this slide linger for a few minutes, and then we'll open to discussion for the remainder of the 20 minutes if you want to stay. If you leave, you don't get free hardware. If you stay, you might. So no pressure, but really would appreciate feedback. QR code for the survey that you can fill out sometime today. The BoF is aimed at answering what you need. I don't really know what you need. So by filling out that survey, you can give some insights into how we can make it better or more focused on what you need. And then that on the right is the link to the Google Drive. Okay? I'm going to jump back to the QR code now, but I just want to say thank you. And we're open for 20 minutes now to talk about anything. Some of the seed conversations I thought we might want to talk about is, these are from an earlier survey that people gave about what they wanted to talk about at the BoF. So some of the topics are community collaboration, HPC capacity building, how do we grow our international partnerships, the HPC community leaders are too busy and how do we fix this, technical challenges in operating a site with ecosystems hardware, how do we support each other's training and support needs, how do we formalize this community and make it more than it is, which is just an informal Slack workspace, according to some of you, which is rubbish. Strategic planning, the community is not rubbish, it's just that sentiment is rubbish. Strategic planning for fundraising, how we can get more money. We all want more money. How we can import donations, because apparently that seems to be a problem. A network switch is a piece of military grade hardware and anything else. So with those seeded topics, I'll put it back to these here. If you have anything, be brave, put up your hand. If you don't have anything, we'll sit here in silence for 20 minutes. If you choose to leave early, I will blacklist you from hardware. So it's that simple. No pressure. It's all up to you how you choose your fate. Ricardo, wait, hold on. We need a microphone because there's guys online. Thank you, Faneka. Faneka's got one. And online people, I will monitor the teams to see if you have anything you want to say. Like an old man. Two. Okay, the microphone has now been handed to Ricardo.
Okay, I think I'll stand. So,
Ricardo is standing.
It's a bit loud. I think you can hear me now. Oh, okay. So, let me just stand this side. So, when we look at, Brian, if you go to the discussion points,
yep.
Not to hijack many of them. So when we look at capacity planning, okay? So when we look at capacity planning, we'll see what we have, what stock we have, what equipment we have, and what's the needs are anywhere else, okay? But now that's a whole process for us, from where the need is and how do we get it there, okay? So there's a process. So Africa, for example, has got quite a number of different countries with different import duties, different import regulatory environments. So there's always a challenge for us. As much as we'll say we're going to get it to you within a week, 5 weeks, a month, when you go through all that regulatory environments, it can easily go up to 3 months. You get this form, you inform government, this department must be informed, that one. Okay, so it can easily get up to 3 months. Malawi was one of our favorites to get in within 1 week. The challenge with Malawi was that it was a bit costly sometimes if you want to ship these things. So the shipping process, the logistics process is quite involved. There's a lot of work that need to be done up front before you can actually get it to where it needs to be. Local shipping is always, it's a pleasure for us to just quickly ship locally. But then again, it also depends on what stock is available, what hardware did we import, okay? The challenge for us to get donations also done when we do get it from wherever else is donating it, we have to import it. Import cost is also sometimes a bit costly. Depending on what time of the year we're going to have to import it, because we also have budget constraints when it comes to importing. We recently would have had quite a bit of stuff coming, equipment coming in. Again, we actually have a bit of budget constraints. So those are all things we need to take into consideration. If you're really ready as a country, you write a brilliant, awesome motivation. Like Brian said, if you don't hunt him down and you see my name somewhere or Fineka's name somewhere, we can always see what Brian is up to or where Brian is, for example. But when you have a very good motivation, you send it to us. We send especially to Brian. Brian will tell us when what the situation is with the country. But sometimes it's hard to deny a very good business case, which means it gives us the opportunity, once you have a very good business case, that we can see who the stakeholders is that bought into this. We can already see where the hiccups it's going to be. Brian will go out into a site. Maybe he will take one or two of the other people with to a site, just overview of the site, and it will come back. But the easier it is for you to get all your stakeholders involved, the better it is for us to consider the relevant country, institution, or wherever it's going to go. Wits for us is a very good example. Like Brian and his team, even what we've just saw now, there's a lot of movement in that particular HPC space. We also got some very good international sites that's doing quite well. But the import process is very involved, especially when it comes from a country perspective. So whenever you do get your business cases right, bear in mind that you can make life easier for us um, if you can also provide us feedback or do a bit of pre-work when it comes to the import environment. Do your own homework and understand what it is that you require to import things in your country. Like I said, locally it's a bit better. Thank you.
Thanks.
On. Yeah, my name is Carlos. Sorry to come to the party
Hi,
so
Carlos.
late.
Nice to finally meet.
Yeah. I just want to find out, just listening to what you're talking about with, I think with my involvement, it's more on a personal level than institutional level. So what are the next steps for making sure that it's just not me, it's get the institutions all involved?
Yeah. So the question is relevant to a lot of people. I think a lot of the sites started as individuals. John Poole, who's online from the US now, he and I started at UKZN, and for us it was a personal thing. We just put our hands up at the CHPC and got noticed, and then that's how I bumped into Brian and Peace and people like that, because we got part of the recipient list. Then it became this very formalized project, which has a government mandate to uplift historically disadvantaged institutes in South Africa. So you're from VUT. Is that an HDI, Historically Disadvantaged Institute? Do you know? I would assume it is. Most of the UTs are historically. So the first thing is, if it's an HDI, I mean, if you came to us and just said, hey, I want to get involved, we would throw all our resources at getting you help. But the best way to do it is to form, if you can, an interest group or nominate a champion with a research need. So I know that you have a personal interest because you want to develop curriculum. That is sufficient. Then we would have our high-level bigwigs make a visit with your vice chancellor, sit down, have a very frank conversation about the benefits that this can have and why all your competitive universities are doing better in many ways because they have the resources. And most of the vice chancellors don't like to hear that. And then they will mandate that it happens, and they probably give you some sort of key to a budget to make it happen. And as long as you're open to being engaged with the community, that's the first step. I mean, even the alternative is just work with us as an individual. We can supply some resources to you quite easily. I don't know how much authority you have to receive hardware or to run hardware in your department, but there's a lot of ways to do it. It just really depends how much noise you want to make at the start. If you want to have a proven track record because you think that'll work better with your leadership, then we work with you on the student cluster competition or developing curriculum that you start. Then if you think you need to prove yourself to your organization first. Otherwise, if you think that they will not hijack it from you, we just go with the bigwig meetings to start with. Yeah, I don't know what else to suggest. From your personal side, just keep being involved in the community and you can grow yourself. But if you want to make it bigger, you need to get some allies. And we can be one of those allies, but you need people in your institute that are going to work with you to form a team, a steering committee. I don't know if anyone else has any experience of how they've started their own groups as an individual in an institute, but I mean, that was kind of how John and I started. And that's the model that we've seen a lot of the sites. You know, it's one person that starts showing an interest, and then we just try to plow in resources to help you to grow it and to prove to your leadership that it's worth it. I don't see anything from online. Even the AI isn't asking questions.
Hey, Brian.
Hey, Senzo.
Yes, on the point of formalizing the community, I think that was one of the concerns for when we were dealing with the hardware donations, like outside of CHPC and CSIR. Obviously, those are the main drivers. But when you raise that internally within certain institutions, the question is there an MOU between whoever is participating? So, for example, if I went out as Vert and raised a donation, and I wanted to pass that donation to someone else because they might need it more than I do, or I want to share that donation with someone else within the HPC ecosystems community, there isn't an MOU within the HPC ecosystems community that would allow me to then take that hardware and actually just easily move it to that person. So one of the concerns was that, and the weird thing is my legal office said it's actually an easy thing to do. All they would need is to be put in a meeting with the other legal offices for the different institutions, and then they draft up an MOU.
Yeah. So this is like a really tricky thing for me as a CHPC employee, because the project, I think what we're trying to do by the merit of this group and the community in the BoF is like a lot more than the actual mandate of the CHPC. The CHPC's mandate when I joined was really just to deliver hardware. It wasn't even really capacity building, but I said you can't have the hardware without capacity building, otherwise it's a big paperweight. And so that's kind of formed into it. When we start talking about MOUs, there's two sides to it. The official CHPC mandated MOU vision might be tricky because they may want to still maintain some sort of control over the initiative, so they wouldn't want other sites like you to operate outside of that. But I see the sustainability of this community being bigger than the CHPC. You know, it depends who's elected to whether the department exists and whether funding comes. And you can't all be relying on Brian with a wire sitting in Cape Town for your survival in this project, right? So I agree with you. I'm looking at the idea that you spun and John Poole spun about nonprofit organizations to get more funding from the United States. I do want to try to formalize the community in the sense that we create an Africa HPC community that is aligned with ecosystems, but is not ecosystems. And then I think MOUs should still come, but maybe we need to look at creating a bigger partnership model for that. And I'm open to any suggestions around it. I think at the very beginning, at least, and I mean, Mervin's not here right now. He was here earlier. The leadership that has the authority to make those decisions is not me, unfortunately, because I can't step over the mandate of the government. But we need to figure out how to do that. I agree. Forming a community that is identified as a community that might not be the ecosystems community. I kind of feel we can't call it ecosystem Slack anymore because there's people outside of ecosystems that are on there. Well, you got to get used to Slack, dude. Just grow up. Brian Maestry's making stupid comments now. What do you want?
So my biggest concern is basically going to be if I have hardware that I want, even if while we're still figuring things out, if I have hardware that I want to pass on to someone else within this community, what's the best way to do it? And that's something that we probably need to discuss and probably need to find a solution for, because I might have hardware that I actually want to pass on to someone else. So if that point comes in, or if I get to that point, what do I do?
Yeah.
And I'm sure people in this community might say, oh, we want that hardware, but there currently isn't a process for me to be able to donate that hardware or to pass on that hardware to that person.
Okay, Senzo, if I may, it's Ricardo, yeah. So normally what happens is we as CHPC, we are an enabler of the whole ecosystem. So we enable wherever we envisage this ecosystem is going to go. But what's important is that, like Brian said, also we don't always have the time. We don't always have the capacity to do so. So one of the more important things is formalizing the community. We have to look at communities of practice. It could be a broader community of HPC practice, but within that community, you're going to have different types of communities of practice, which include maybe your AI stream, machine learning stream, or depending on where it is. And then it's also just the capacity building and infrastructure stream within that community of practice. And I think, yes, Slack is there, but there's also other ways. Could be also a bit of a podcast. But this community of practice should be set up by the community as a whole or itself. And we as HPC will be monitoring whatever else is there. So if there is hardware and stuff that can be donated, you feel free, because we are not mandated to donate your hardware, but we could monitor who gets what, and also raise the concern if those hardware might not be used by the community, for example. But I think also very important is to build a community from a user community perspective or group perspective. And even if we are not involved, conversations will continue. Development will continue. So we are just the enabler, but the community are free. They feel free to build that type of capacity. There's different type of technologies. There's different methods or ways that share knowledge. Although there is the technology vehicle, there's also other ways, like the papers that we write, the BoFs that we do, for example. So there's many other alternatives to keep this community going. But most importantly for this community is that we need to define who your focal or key actors are, which CHPC is one of them. And those are the people that's going to keep the community going. People will come and go, or actors will come and go, but the core or focal actors will keep this community going. That's my view. Got it?
Sendo?
Got it, got it.
Cool.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so I can just finish off my thoughts on this, is that I totally agree that there needs to be a more formal identifying factor for the community that is beyond what the official mandate is of ecosystems. And if that requires us to do a three-way MOU at the moment just to make things happen, like a three-way partnership, where CHPC is the enabler between two partner sites, we can do that because we have budget to enable the infrastructure deployment in Africa. So like if you have hardware and you have a relationship with another site, but you don't have the funds to do it, we can support that, or we can work together to create a three-way partnership. And that's I've been working on before with other sites, you know, like TAC, NIH, and CHPC with Clemson and Africa. So it's possible. It's definitely something worth talking about. There's 4 minutes left. There's got to at least be someone with a worthy enough question for Brian's laptop. Or free tickets to the museum opening. Where's a question? So there's nothing else? Oh, Fineka has a question or a comment. Hey? Not a question, a comment. Is it for where the ecosystems party is tonight? Free food tonight, folks.
Oh, can you hear me? Is it on? Oh, for the machine, Lily, it's ready at CSR. It's just internal paperwork we need to do with Brian at the office next week. So after that, we are ready to go. So I will inform you next week what's the process. Otherwise, it's ready for you at the CSR.
Is that the CSR Pretoria?
Yeah.
Oh, exciting. Yeah?
Okay. Yeah, that's loud. So just to conclude, okay? It doesn't matter where you are in the world. If you ever come down to Cape Town, and you're always welcome to come visit the CHPC. You don't need an invitation. If we are there, we are there. You're always welcome. We'll take you around. We can even talk about operations, CHPC operations. We can talk about, we'll show you around. We'll discuss how we do things. So whenever you're in Cape Town, and it doesn't matter who you bring along, you can bring anybody along. So do come and pay us a visit. If it's a weekday, we don't work over weekends. Grandma, grandpa, a friend, children, you're always welcome to come and visit us. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good rest of your week, and I will see you next year because I'm gone. I'm on leave until January, but you can chat to me on Slack. Yeah. Sorry, did I not tell you that? But I'll help you with your email, don't worry. Thanks, everyone online in digital land. Thank you for participating. Cheers, guys. Have a good holiday.